Okay, it's at the end. Hello, everybody. Today we have a wonderful guest. Her name is Debra Sunderland. I just wanted to give a little pre-context before we go right into this. She asked me to cut out the stuff earlier that we were talking about, and I really couldn't find a start to the end to our whole conversation, and she just had to magically disappear. So I'm just leaving it as is. It was a great conversation. Very thought-provoking, we'll put it that way. And yeah, I had an absolute blast and it was fun.
Welcome to the Josh Bolton Show, where we dive into interesting and inspiring conversations. And now, your host, Josh Bolton.
Hello, how are you doing?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Doing pretty good.
What are you excited about today?
So much, because the whole setting expectation, the expectation thing, I'm like, that's how I've always functioned. How is this killing me kind of thing?
Right. The excellence, right? Exactly. It's killing America right now, actually, right? It's killing organizations. It's killing health. It's killing well-being. Yeah. So there's lots to say about that.
Oh yeah. And there's plenty of other things we can go into too, but I was just like, because I do martial arts and our whole instructor is like, you have to be excellent or nothing. And I'm like, okay, sir. And I'm sitting here going, now how do I tell them to go bug off kind of thing?
Yeah, right. Exactly. There's so much to say about that. Yeah. It's interesting because I just got off of a call. Getting a little bit of feedback right here. Just got off of a call with an advisor. I'm an advisor with an entrepreneur center here in Nashville. And he was just asking me, I didn't ask him, he brought it up. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, I'm really concerned about how do I build culture? I'm starting another business. I want to make sure XYZ. I want to make sure I have gold handcuffs. I'm like, that ain't gonna work. But
going in with gold handcuffs, that's bad.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I think he didn't mean it that way. He wanted to make sure that he's bringing people in, but we've all been taught, right, unconsciously, that there's a way to make sure people stay, right? And it's got to be more money, and that's never the answer. So
I literally just got off yesterday. I had a call with this one German in Frankfurt, Germany.
Yeah,
and that was his whole thing. Well, he does killing your sacred cow, which is essentially whatever it let's say for phones, the Samsung S whatever series is their moneymaker, so they only focus on that. So he's saying, actually, what we need to do is completely pivot away from that. And I sat there, I'm like, so many companies would be really pissed with you on that statement, because that's the goose that lays the golden egg. He's like, for now. And I sat there and I'm like, okay, explain this.
Yeah, I'm excited, actually. I'm excited that we're finally having a disruption. We're recording right now.
Yeah, I can chop all this out if you need.
Yeah, perfect. I'm just really flaming excited that people are finally no more. And I'm going to go into a sucky culture that stinks and is toxic. I'm thankful, but my concern is that people are leaving thinking that they're going to, maybe not everyone, but some people are thinking, I'm going to go to a different job, a different role, a different organization, and then it'll be better. But what we've really resigned from, my belief, and this is what I'm hoping people really discover, is that we resigned from ourselves at a very young age.
Yes, the killing the inner child.
Yeah, we have resigned from ourselves, and we haven't questioned what we've been taught. We've just gone along with protocol for most people, right? So
yeah,
we went on for most, right? We've been told since kindergarten, hey, these are how you put your blocks together, and this is how you're going to actually graduate and be able to go to first grade. And if you do your writing and your letters this way, then you can go to second grade. And we've been told all these things, which have been helpful, and we've been taught because the people that taught us didn't question what they were being told, right? And so I'm like, thank God people are finally being like, this doesn't work anymore. I want to live a different way. But the answer is never outside of us. The answer is inside. The answer is inside. And we all have that beautiful answer inside, but we just need to stop and listen and trust what's inside of us.
Oh, 100%. No, I agree with that. Funny with the whole kindergarten, you have to write a certain way and do this. I was the kid in, I think, kindergarten, and it was like first or second grade. You know, the classic square, circle, triangle, and you got to put the piece in
the ball. Yep.
Yeah. And I didn't listen. No one told me this. So I took a square and shoved it right through a circle.
I'm going to make this happen.
I will make this happen, hell or high water.
But isn't that beautiful? Because what happens in organizations is that when HR or whoever's doing the hiring is looking for a position to fill, let's make it the round ball with the different shapes on it. What people have done, maybe what they've succeeded at, how much they've earned before, whatever there is. Oh, well, that's a good fit. We're going to put them into this slot because they've got the tasks. Just like as we went to first grade, we can go to second grade. But yet the inner part of that workings of that person, they might fit in the exterior part, but the inner part of that person, it is not a fit and they're not happy, but they think it is a fit because they've been told that their whole life. So they keep going along with it. But then when they go to work, they're still not happy and they're doing the tasks and they might be meeting their goals, but they're not happy and they're getting money and that's still not making them happy. And then they become disenchanted or disengaged or right. And they start going to work and I'm like, why am I doing this? And then they start to feel like, what's wrong with me? Because I've spent all my waking hours on trying to get this degree or this MBA or even a CEO, right? Those are the people who I believe who I work with have suffered the most because they've pushed themselves so hard to achieve and win that they get here and there's still this lack of fulfillment and they feel like they fit into this puzzle. So what's wrong with me that I still feel unhappy?
Well, and most executives, I know this from chatting with all sorts of walks of lives. The ones I had are luckily the more healthier ones that do not just money and progress and that's all. But a lot of them have told me they're like, a lot of executives were lonely, were isolated. No one understands how much hell we're going through. And we believe we can't show emotions because it's a sign of weakness. And the same one is the one I was explaining how showing emotions like, I'm human, I'm going to cry. This is just fucked up kind of thing. And just asking for help. He's like, that's more powerful than trying to stand there like the old 1950s, crack the whip, work. You're just a gear to be ground. He's like, that never worked to begin with. It kind of got short-term results, but after a while, morale was just non-existent.
It's not sustainable. And how do we know it's not sustainable? We're in a crisis now, a mental health crisis, a talent crisis, and a leadership crisis. We are in major crises across the board. And it's like from our young ones, like the biggest amount of death right now among 12 to 32-year-olds, I know you know this, is first of all, accidents. And second is suicide. Mm-hmm. Now, how does that happen to be? It's because we're teaching these dear kids the same crap that we were taught, but they're getting it multiple because they're hearing it on here
and it's seeing it on amplified. Here.
It's super amplified. And they're like, crap, I'm not measuring up. I'm worthless. And I'm like, what are we doing to our kids?
Oh yeah.
And so, it's got to stop. It's got to change. So I'm excited that we're finally at a crossroads because I'm hoping and praying I'm part of the change to help turn this ship around. And that people start to step into who are they called to be and what are they here to do, that they get to choose and decide and create that for themselves versus same old.
100%. Debra, how about we introduce yourself and I'll figure out a good spot to go. And I'll just chop that off because we could just keep going for hours.
Totally. Okay. Yeah. So you're going to introduce me or am I introduce myself?
You go for it.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I'm Debra Sunderland of Sunderland Coaching. I am a conscious leadership expert. And what that means is that I coach CEOs, executives, highly successful people on how they're still not creating what they most want. The results aren't adding up, whether it's a culture, whether it's revenue, whatever it is. And how do they create that unconsciously? And how do they become conscious using their IQ, EQ, BQ, their unconsciousness, which is most of the time we're unconscious. And how do they step into being conscious and aware and awake and being the chooser of their results versus just being at whim and hoping the best all works out. So really, I just look at results, and if they're not working, how they create that unconsciously and how to become conscious and create it consciously.
Brilliant. That's pretty much what we covered earlier too.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to touch back onto the mental health issue. That's actually the biggest one. My gripe is, yes, this phone is great. There are opportunities now that 12-year-olds can make a lot of money kind of thing. And this was never a thing before. But at the same time, like Facebook's in it at least yesterday, I don't know about today, they're in a ringer for this exact reason. It's giving false sense of, oh, this is what a relationship's supposed to be, this lovey-dovey. And that's where one of my coworkers, we were chatting, and I told him, he's like, oh, this couple looks so great. And I look at him like, I bet you like $10. They're really good at Photoshop and staging for about a half a second. Yeah. Other than that, they're just as miserable as us.
Yeah. And the sad thing is we're suffering more than ever, or maybe we've suffered just as much, but now it's coming out. I'm not really sure, but for sure it's coming out now.
I think it's more known as I've listened to like older books like Mark Twain, Moby Dick. I've noticed they would talk, but the difference with the phone, which is the blessing and at times can be the curse, is it couldn't get past the community. So if you were in that town, it would only stay in that town.
Now it's global. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now you can hear at least, 4 billion people who have phones, 2 billion using Facebook, 2 billion different opinions. That's a lot of information, even for us.
Totally. It's like overload. Yeah. So I love that you're bringing this up because we all have the opportunity to step away from this, our screens. But we're addicted to it because we get on an adrenaline hit or rush. So we're like, don't even realize we're attached and addicted to our devices. But we all have the opportunity if we pause. Well, my work is around doing breathing exercises. And I'm sure you're up to this too. It's meditating and getting away from what's outside of us and coming inward, because we're so externally based right now. And how do we come inward to notice ourselves, to notice and allow our thoughts, which our thoughts are random. They just pop in. But they do. I think they say there are 60 to 65,000 thoughts. Is it a day or a day? So it's about almost to 2,000 thoughts in a moment time. It's downloading into our brain and it's like, whoa. And then we don't even know what we're latching onto as a thought, that we actually believe it to be true without questioning it. And then when we actually believe it unconsciously, we have an emotional response to that in our body. That's what emotions are. Emotional intelligence are then grabbing onto that thought. And usually it's fear, because we all have a negative bias, a protector in our brain. You know this. And that negative thought is like on alert. It's that threat, and it's a hypervigilance as to what's going on out there, what might go wrong, what is wrong, how is that person going to hurt me or harm me in a way of maybe not giving me what I want, or not doing the job I want them to do, or whatever the story is.
Right.
And this is all happening very quickly in our mind, very, very quickly. And we're then reacting. And we're doing this, we're putting up defenses, we're putting up walls, and then we're getting this from screens, and it's like overload, and we're not stopping to think, what am I telling myself? And what am I feeling right now when I have this thought? How is my body reacting when I have this thought? And these are things that we all can do to take good care of ourselves, is to stop and notice and pause. And that's why meditation is becoming so big, and mindfulness and gratitude, the opposite of our negative bias is to have thankfulness and gratitude. Anyway, we all do have the possibility to shift out of this, but we have to be responsible for ourselves first and foremost.
100%. That's the biggest one. Like when I was younger, like I was saying, I did the square peg round hole. But when I was a kid back in the 90s, there was no politically correct. There was the internet, but it wasn't built out the way it is now. And essentially, this doctor was really lazy and didn't want to deal with me. Said he's schizophrenic. I was ADHD as a kid. So most of my life I was on medications, scrambled my brain in different directions. I've been 3 years clean, but that was the one. Once I introduced a phone, holy shit, I was already emotional. That made it way worse.
Mm-hmm. So you know what I'm talking about. So what are you up to in the world right now? Like what gets you excited and where do you put your energy these days?
Actually talking to people like you on the show, editing it. I'm starting to do YouTube, trying to figure that one out. That's a mess in and of itself. And then I'm personally learning business and trading. That was like the thing. It was the March 2020 crash for COVID that sparked me. I'm like, why are some people dancing in the street like it's the best thing since sex, and some are crying like a Beelzebub just entered the room? And I'm like, I couldn't understand it. That's started this whole rabbit hole. Trading is buying businesses. Business is this. It was mindset is spirituality. And I was like, oh, so just you always have to keep learning. And that's the one thing I now hold. I'm like, I cannot just say I'm this.
I love that. You said a very, very, very important thing, right? Which I'm sure you've heard this. I've heard it recently. I forgot about these words, fixed mindset or a non-fixed mindset, or open and curious, right? So if we're open and curious, like you said, always learning, the world's our oyster, because there's never a failure. There's never a failure.
There's not.
There's never a failure. If we look at life as always an experience and a learning experience. The world's our oyster. We just keep learning from everything and feeding off of that and growing and feeding off of all of it. It's just beautiful. But we have to, like you said, we have to be willing to learn. And most people are about being right.
Yes. It's the sad part.
That's the sad part. Most people are about being, this is the way it should be. This is what you should do. This is what you should say or not say. I have to say our culture in America really saddens me when I hear about, and this might be like a faux pas to say this on your show, but censoring.
I don't care. If you want to cuss up a storm, go for it, man.
Okay. Yeah. But I mean, like what the F, like, you can, okay, let's just say this, Trump. I don't care if you believe in him or not. I don't care if you voted for him or not. I don't care if you think he's evil or not. However, to censor someone and you can't go on Twitter or you can't go on Facebook because of what you say. You might, of course, some of the things that people say is downright despicable and hurtful and unkind, but to censor someone, this is getting into a slippery slope.
Oh, it is.
Of what someone can say or not say. Right. And this is how, I'm just going to make up something here. This is how Germany started into the Holocaust.
Interesting. Okay.
Because there was someone called Hitler who rose to, he didn't just outright become Hitler as we know it. It was little by little by little, what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's allowed, what's not allowed. If you think this way, it's okay. And if you say this and do that, even vaccinations, if you're vaccinated, then you're okay. If you're not vaccinated, you're not okay. Whatever your side is, right? Everyone can have their side or not. And this is what happened with Hitler. This is what happened in the Holocaust is if you're Jew, it's not okay. Eventually, that's what happened. Eventually, if you're this belief, if you're this religion, if you're this, it's not okay. It was little by little by little by little till everyone said, oh, you're in that camp, we're getting rid of you. And the way that we censor people is getting rid of someone, not hearing you, not being allowed to speak or have your own opinion. That censoring is saying you are of no value. Your thoughts are of no value. We might not agree with you. We might think it's horrible, but to not have the ability to have conversations and to be heard from all sides and only have one side is right and one side is wrong. That's how Hitler was. This is right and this is wrong. And we become a culture of right and wrong, not of love, not of peace, not of joy, not of hearing, not of accepting. It's a right or a wrong. US culture, and we've become a very unkind culture, as you know, right? We've become like a civil war in many ways.
And that was actually one thing. I made a prediction with my buddy during the Trump election when he first got in. I said, there are about two things that are going to come from this. And he looks and he's like, I'm already like 2 beers in. And he's like, all right, well, we'll see how this goes. I said, we're either going to be so divided that there is going to be no repair, or he's going to figure out how to declare martial law. And we have Trumpica for the rest of our lives. He almost figured out the second one. Almost.
Right. So exactly. So I just want to say, I'm so thankful you brought that up, because in August, right before the election, I had gone with my children to Shiloh. We're history buffs. A lot of people don't unfortunately know what Shiloh is. It's, do you know what Shiloh is?
No, I don't. So please explain.
Okay. So again, we aren't taught history. And if we don't learn from history, guess what's going to happen?
We're going to repeat ourselves.
Thank you. Shiloh, I'm going to cry. Shiloh is a Civil War site. It's in Tennessee.
Okay.
Shiloh was a very large battle where 24,000 people were killed. American people were killed.
Mm-hmm.
American North-South people were killed in one day.
Ooh, that's impressive, especially with those guns back then too.
In one day.
Damn.
Okay. Now, why is this significant?
Because I'm speculating it's the willingness to slaughter your own fellow man in that much time is unspeakable. Insert E here, evil, whatever it is.
It was, again, arguing, this is right, this is wrong, and we're going to kill you. We're willing to kill you. We're going to kill you, my brother. I'm going to kill you, my brother. And there were brothers that were north-south. Mm-hmm. You can read about it, that they had to actually fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I got out of the car and I see a graveyard, tombstones of my fellow brothers, maybe some sisters from my country that killed each other. And this is before the election. And I just wept. Because people don't realize we're doing the same thing and we're on the same journey. Because we're not hearing each other. We're not saying, gosh, tell me more about that. I don't agree with you, but I'm willing to learn and get curious, just like you said, learning. I'm willing to learn your perspective. It doesn't mean I have to be on your side ever, but at least I'm willing to hear you and wonder, could there be some truth in what you're saying? Could there be something that could help me or the people I'm involved with? Could there be just one thing? But it was already no. Like there wasn't a win for all in the Civil War. It was my way, my way. And until we decide to become an organization, a family, a husband and wife, a country that's willing to say, we want to win for all. How do we get there? And I'm curious and I want to learn, how am I part of that? What's my part to be a change agent to creating that? We will keep fighting and we're all going to lose in the end.
So that's one thing. As I've read different literature and listened, that is the one thing I really hope I'm wrong. But I'm like, we are repeating the Civil War, but it also indirectly repeating the fall of Rome, where the slaves had slaves, which the slaves didn't have to do anything. So no one was doing anything and they just walked in and took everything. Yeah. So I'm like, there are a few things like during the pandemic, yes, during the mass forced lockdowns, yes, pay them unemployment kind of thing, because you told them to go home. But it was to extend it so long as they did. It was like, that's encouraging the slaves not having to work. And I'm like, that's a slippery slope. And I've joked with my coworkers because we're losing kids left and right. Where I am, we can't retain them because they're like, the government pays me more. Why should I work for you?
Yeah.
And that was the one of them. I told them it's going to be interesting in 15, 20 years to see how this generation plays out.
Yeah, it is. I'm thankful that you're learning about history. I've said a lot. So I homeschooled my children for many years because I don't like the way, as we talked about earlier, the way we teach our children. And I wanted my kids to be, number one, said, I want them to love learning. I want them to love learning. And both of my children came out learning what they most love to do. And they're doing that, both of them. My daughter's at American University right now. My son graduated from Belmont here in Nashville in the spring. And wait, what was my point? Oh, so the thing that I'm really excited about is this younger generation, younger than me, a couple decades younger. If we give them the opportunity to discover what they love, to practice growing in what they love, and how can they bring that to the world? If we just give them that opportunity, they're going to step up and do it because they've seen the older generation like me suffer. And they don't want any part of that. They don't want any part of that. They want to live a purpose life and they want to bring purpose. And I see that with my children. I see my daughter doing that at American. Her senior year in high school is raising money for the Muslims in China.
Wow.
Yeah. She's, it's, if we give them the opportunity, if we all give each other the opportunity to say, hey, what do you love doing? And how can I support you in doing that? What's your heart's desire and what you want to create and give to the world? Very different outcome. So I'm hoping we can get there.
And I think especially with as feisty as the young generation is, the one lower than me, this Gen Zers, I believe they call them. I think that's what they're aiming for, but they have a bit of an entitlement problem. That's one thing I hope they can fix eventually. But I think that's what they're wanting, and they're trying their damnedest to get to that point. But again, my generation, the millennials, were taught a certain way. We kind of were open-minded, but then we immediately closed it because bills came into action, and we're like, can't do that.
Yeah, the fear. So this is what stops all of us. This is my work, because when we're unconscious, fear is going to be driving us. And fear is helpful for us because it says caution, pay attention. And if we listen to it, we'll learn. However, I'm talking about toxic fear. Toxic fear that's like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And we don't learn from the fear, and it becomes in our body, this fear. And when we become in our reactive to our fear, we limit all of the results in our life, results in our relationships, results even in our money, results in our businesses. And that's why most companies never increase the revenue, their culture, their whatever it is that they want, because they're fear motivated. We don't realize it, right? So it's how do we not motivate ourselves by fear? Fear's here is a great thing for us, but when it drives us, it gives us very, very limited parameters. And
that was most of my life. This is where like talking, it's music with my martial arts instructor. He's like, how can you talk to kids so well? You're like 28, yet they instantly click with you. I'm like, because I still remember their pain. I know exactly what they're going through. I said, at your age, you're double mine. I'm like, you don't remember that pain as much as you used to. He's like, yeah, it was rough. He was an immigrant. So he's like, they would call you a terrorist and all of this and then kick you. But I'm like, does that hurt when you think about it though? And he's like, no. I said, I was beaten in school. And so I told him, like, they're not physically being beaten. They're mentally being attacked now. There's never a physical wound. But those scars don't heal the same as if you got slashed on the chest kind of thing. And I told him like that, the mental part, they just need someone to see them for who they are. Someone hurting. And I mean, permission granted, you give them a hug, but that's a little subjective there, but, and he just laughs.
No, I love that because I thank you for sharing that, because we all have wounds. We were all at some point at a young age disappointed in some way, either disappointed or our hearts were broken. And we have all experienced that, whether it was physical, emotional, both, psychological. And if we could all hover and pull back, I love that you asked that question of your instructor. If we could all just hover back and pull back and look at, like, we've all had that experience and we all have the same want. We all want to be loved. We all want to be accepted. We all want to have safety. We all want to have just the basics, a roof, food, and connection.
Right.
If we have that, we're golden. And if we can look at like how we're all really the same versus how we're not the same, that will bridge the gap. Is what's the similarities we have? What's the similarities? That's what you're saying to your instructors. Like, can you remember what's similar to you? Can you go back to what might be going on for them? Where are the similarities? And if we can build on that, wow, that changes everything.
Oh, it does. And that's how I've always been. I always hear people for who they are. And it was sad to hear it. I was just working somewhere and an old high school friend, very quiet woman. I didn't really even know her. It was just one of those, like 8 years later, I'm at a Taco Bell, just getting some food, heading home. And she said, "Hey, Josh, by the way, thank you. You helped me out." And I kind of, like, as I'm eating my taco, like half hanging in my mouth, I'm like, "What? What do you mean? Wait, how did I help you?" And then I'm like, "Oh, wait, you're the quiet one. I can never actually can figure out your name." And she's like, "Yes, something, Jessica." And I said, "Oh, how are you doing?" And she's like, "Good." And then she goes to explain that it was one of those offhanded, I wasn't even thinking about the comment or the ramifications. She was asking, what do I do in this situation? Let's just say if a boy is talking to me, kind of thing. Because I thought it was awkward. She was really awkward when it came to talking to people. And I just told her, I'm like, just listen to him. If he's talking about video games, even if you don't know video games, kind of like fudge around, figure it out. We dudes, as long as you're interested in it, they'll love you, okay? And it was just one of those. I didn't know it, but I guess she got with this guy and it was great, and they were going. And it's a terrible event happened. I'm going to say it's one of those, I don't know the details, so I don't want to fully tell that one. But essentially, she just recovered from all that. And I was just like, oh. And she's like, it was because of you. So she's like, I went and talked to someone that would hear me from me the way I would treat so-and-so. And she's like, I recovered. And I'm like, I just sat there. I'm like, that was just an offhanded, like, I saw a problem. Like, here's the easiest fix I can think of. I got to go to class now.
Yeah. And that's beautiful because you spoke from your heart. You knew what was true. It's the littlest thing, and it's the biggest thing that you just shared with her, and it changed her, and it touched her heart. And, and that's what I think too. It's like, we got to stop meeting people in our brains. We need to meet people in their hearts. And if we can touch people's hearts, no matter what their brain says, I think that's the connector. And it sounds weird. I've just had this thought in my head. I've actually put myself, this might sound weird. I've actually put myself in a situation in my mind, right? So you never know until it actually happens how you might respond. But I really tried to think of, how would I respond if I'm walking down the street or walk into a bank or walk into a store and there's a terrorist that walks in with a gun?
Okay.
How would I respond? Now,
I'm going to say, I'm going to quote, I think it's Mayweather or Floyd. No, it's the same person. You all have a game plan until you get punched in the face. It's so true. As I've done martial arts, I had this brilliant plan. I was going to fight someone. I'm going to take him down this way. I'm going to do this. We're going to grapple. Immediately just decks me in the head. And I'm like, what the heck just happened?
Yeah, totally.
And it's not a physical attack, but it's the same thing. Like, it was one of those, I work security, and we actually had a similar incident, and truckers are incredible. The amount of crazy stuff they pull off. And we found one, and even the guy didn't know. And it just essentially, I kind of like sat back and I'm like, technically I'm supposed to call 911 and evacuate everyone. And my heart rate was beyond like 200 beats per second. I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
Yeah, right. Like, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, and that's where I stammered, and essentially I have a very loud voice, so I yelled because it wasn't like a trigger or anything. There was no one nearby. It was just one of those. If you opened it, well, half the warehouse is going to go missing, kind of trap. And so I called the lady because I couldn't get to the phone in time. I wasn't thinking straight. And I said, because I saw her walk in, and I said, Annie, we have a very explosive delivery today. That was the lady walking in. And she kind of sat there and chuckled, like, ha, 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 be careful not. Oh. And then she ran in.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when we're reactive and not intentional, right? Reactivity is going to be like fighting. That's our automatic, is to fight, to put up our defenses, to keep our bodies safe, to keep all of ourselves safe, right? But I thought, how would I go beyond that in that space? If someone were to walk it towards me with a machine gun, what would I do? Right? I really thought about that, right? Am I going to try and tackle them? Well, good luck, right?
You're better running back and forth like this.
Right. Even if I run, they're going to get me, right? But what I really thought of is, how would I want to die? How would I want to die? And this goes along for my whole life, because eventually we're all going to die, whether we're shot with a machine gun or we die of natural causes or cancer, whatever it is. How do I want to die? How am I going to choose? If I could choose how I'm going to die. And I thought I would want to walk towards that person.
Interesting.
I want to walk towards them. And I would want to say, I love you.
If you get close enough.
Right. What in my heart, in my mind, that's how I'd want to do it, because the defense in us wants to push away and say, you're bad, you're wrong, I'm going to fight you. Okay. The opposite of fear is love. The opposite of fear is love. And so if I were to walk towards someone, regardless of how they're going to be, my responsibility is to love. My responsibility is for how I'm going to show up in the world, regardless of how the other person is, whether they have a machine gun, and that could be a machine gun of anything. I'm just making up that story. It could mean you're not going to pay me for the work I've given you. It could, whatever that is, whatever that threat is out there, right? My responsibility is I'm going to have to show up in, do I love myself? Do I love the person on the other side, no matter how they are showing up? And do I love the greater world, the universe, God? That's my responsibility. And if I can master that, then I'm golden. Then I'm golden, because I'm at peace with myself. And that's all I can do, is with peace with myself. I can't change how the other person is going to respond. I can only change myself. And so I think about that. I think of, how do I want to show up in the world? How do I want to show up? How am I going to keep growing and showing up no matter what the threat is out there? It's still my responsibility as to how I'm going to meet that threat, because it's only in my mind that it's a threat. Even if someone were to show up with a machine gun, it's still only in my mind that it's a threat. Because where I'm dying, it's not just the physical. Where I'm dying is in my heart. And that's my decision on how I want to live or die, is in my heart. I get to choose. I get to choose. And no one can take that away from me. No one can take that away.
All right. I like it. That's kind of where it's my stance too, is it's funny how you say it. I think very similar minds. I run simulations, but I don't run it that intense. It's like, if this happens, this happens. If B happens, kind of like, it's like a tree. But no, that's the biggest one I've come to, especially talking to people, is the biggest one I hate was the Steve Jobs quote, is like, if I die, I know I only have 7 days left. Will I be satisfied with what I'm doing right now? Yeah. And it was one of those, I heard at a young age. I'm just one of those, I'm like, whatever. It's an old man stealing like corporate stocks and whatever. Now I realize, I'm like, no, he worked for that. But that hits, because I'm like, yeah, what? We had a friend in the family just die. He was walking and just poof, just died. And it's just one of those, like it hit everyone else, but I'm like, he probably was, well, he didn't live the healthiest lifestyle, but he was probably pretty content because he had a taco shop business and he knew his daughter could take over it. So mentally he checked out. He's like, my family's safe. I don't physically have to be here anymore. Kind of thing. I said, that's what I'm telling myself. It could have just had something terrible go wrong, but
yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought this up because if anyone knows my story, the reason I got to my work was because I almost did die. Right. So
okay.
I almost did die. So this is really interesting that you're bringing this up. So for 40 some years of my life, I ran the racket that most people run. Achieve. I was the overachiever. Everything I did, I was the best at, whether it was violin playing, I was that first chair violinist, whether it was running track as a sprinter, whether it was academics, whether it was sales, like whatever I was doing, no one was going to beat me.
Right.
So at the age of 42, my guy friends who I used to ride my bikes with, they're like, oh, well, you're really awesome. You should like race. I'm like, no, I don't want to crash. Well, finally I decided to race and I found I was addicted to racing my bike, cycling. And my first year of racing, I was 42 years old. I found out how good I was. And this is not to brag, but it's just to tell you about my overachieving ways and the pushing of not failing, which you already read, your excellence is killing you. The pushing to win, which was a temporary satisfaction, a temporary hit of feeling good. Because it was never enough because there's always something else to achieve. I was number 2 out of 998 women racing my bike in the United States.
That's impressive.
Thank you. And I'm not saying it to brag. I'm telling you, this is my crazy ways. And
if you weren't number 1, that was enough, huh?
Right. Was it number 1? Well, my first year, I felt the first place person, she was 12 years old. Okay.
So she has youth on her side.
She had youth on her side. And most of the people that were racing were 20 or younger. They weren't even 20. And so you're put in, given your ability with cycling, you're always put in with your ability. And then you move up depending on how well you do. And
yeah, it's like chess.
Right. Exactly. And then you move up. So I'm like, okay, cool. Even at age 42, I can still, win. I can still get on the podium. So 3 years of racing, I was moving up to be a semi-pro. And I was racing, and in the midst of that race, I got bumped by another cyclist, unbeknownst to me, and I don't remember. I smacked my head on the curb, cracked my skull open with a brand new helmet. My brain bounced to the back of my head to the front of my head, started bleeding everywhere, shattered 9 ribs, punctured my lungs, separated my shoulders, started convulsing, and didn't know that I was fighting for my life. The race doctor came, tried to revive me. I was raised to a trauma 1 hospital in Chicago. My family was called and said, she's not going to make it. You need to get here. Now, none of this was I knowing. I had no idea I was fighting.
Yeah, you're out.
I was out. So if I had died, I would have known it. No idea. I've been blessed to have been given my life back. When I was finally released from being in the hospital for a month, I had to learn to walk. Mm-hmm. I had to learn to talk. I had to learn to use this right part of my body and to cut my food again. I was highly injured. The neurologist said it's going to take most likely 3 years for your brain to heal. You are severely injured. And I already learned from a young age, because I had a traumatic childhood, the cost of knowing what I believe was everything. And I immediately said to him, hell no, it will not. I wasn't going to take what he was telling me as truth. And within 8 months, I was back on my bike. And my coach was like, holy crap, you're exactly where you were before your accident. Now, the big part of this was that I knew my life was more than just racing and getting things done and winning. I didn't know what that meant. So I called out to God, the universe, and I said, clearly my life was spared for more than winning. What the hell is it? I'm given a second chance here to live a fulfilled life, a purpose, a meaning. What am I being called to? Who am I? besides a winner, who am I called to be? What the hell am I here for?
But you get
just that thought. Yeah, just this, and this is what I want everyone to do for their life. I want them to stop and pause. What the hell am I here for? What's mine to do, and who am I called to be? Because no one is the same as anyone else. And you'll never be, no one can be you ever in all of eternity, in all of history. No one can ever be you. No one can be me. So there's a reason. So I asked God, please show me. So when I was finally cleared to be on my bike and about to go over some railroad tracks where my daughter had just said prior to that, I was dropping her off and her brother off to school. And I heard her say, when she saw these beautiful people getting on the train in Chicago, she said to me, but before I got on my bike, she said, Mama, why are all these people getting on the train, going to work, looking so unhappy? I was like, and she's 11 years old. I was like, oh, like all I could do is agree with her. I'm like, you are so right. Like everyone is miserable. They've got all these beautiful clothes on, live in these mansions, and they're miserable. And I said, honey, all I can do is say, you're right. I went home to get on my bike, about to cross the same railroad tracks, and my purpose came to me. And this is clearly what I heard inside of my soul, in my head, in my whole being. Thank God I almost died doing something I love doing, racing my bike, and I was awesome at it. These dear precious people are getting on the train, going to work every day, dying a slow death, doing something they don't most want to do, and they don't even realize it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to wake them the hell up. That is exactly what I got. So I didn't in my head know what that was going to be, how that was going to happen. I just knew that was my calling. That was my main reason for being here, was to wake people up to their purpose and calling.
Even if you can wake one person up from the rat race to help them get out of it, that's monumental. That's priceless right there.
It is. It's everything to me. And so now I get to live the life that I most love. Because of course, when you're called to something, guess what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm. You're going to do it. No,
you're going to do it, and things are going to come to you because your vibration is in that space, and things are just going to come to you easily, naturally. And utter somewhere so I'm still brain injured, I'm still healing. And someone in Colorado, another coach, finds out that I want to do this kind of coaching. And he's like, oh, well, have you heard of conscious leadership? And have you heard of blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, no. And I read the intro to this book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, find out that the author, one of the authors, lives 20 miles from me. And I read the intro, it's 54 pages long. I'm like, holy crap, this is exactly, it was about being conscious, awake or not awake, and just going along to reactivity. I'm like, I need to talk to you right now. Can we meet? And that was my journey 8 years ago, to understanding about being present, being awake, being the chooser of how I want to live my life and how I want to go about my life. And these are the tools I share with the world. These are the tools that I give to the most successful people who are interested in living a fulfilled life versus just a successful life. And so it all comes together.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Yeah.
So what are some of the tools that you teach the people?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So one huge one for me that changed my life is how to breathe, which sounds crazy because they're like, well, don't I breathe all the time? I'm breathing. And so I must be alive. I'm alive. I must be breathing. When we are not conscious to our breath, we're only breathing shallow breaths. Mm-hmm. Because we're already in an automatic defense to protect our body, because our default is protection. We have a negative bias. And so we're thinking something's wrong. So what happens is our body holds together like this, and our body constricts, and our lungs don't even fully breathe.
No.
So we have very shallow breaths. And what happens when we have shallow breath is we don't even think clearly, and we're being reactive. So my very first thought is to tell people, check in with your breath when you're feeling threatened, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling frustrated. Take 3 deep, slow inhales from your belly all the way up through your lungs, because your lungs actually come from the top of your shoulder, pretty much all the way down your back. Breathe all the way in and breathe all the way out. Learning to breathe, simple breathing practices turns your whole nervous system around. Actually your neurosympathetic system.
I can definitely vouch for that.
You've known that. Have you practiced that before?
Well, they're okay. Well, bit of a mean lady. I don't deal with her anymore, but she, I had to work with her for a while, and literally, you knew she entered the room. Like you could be in the back of the building and just be like, "Oh, so and so is here." Like my soul just died essentially. So there was one point she was yelling at me for no reason at all, just yelling at me. My heart rate picked up, and immediately I just in front of her just went like 5-6 times, and she's like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "You stressed me out." Okay, what were you saying again?
Right. But the cool thing is you took ownership, like I was talking about before, around how do I want to be with myself, regardless of how someone else is. I know I can calm myself down. Doesn't matter if she wants to be angry or mean or however she is. I can take care of myself. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that has been transformational for me, in addition to breathing, is to question my thinking. Because I already know that I'm going to have a defensive, reactive thought automatically that's going to be protective. I want to get curious. Like you said about learning, curiosity and learning are the opposite of reactivity. So I always ask myself when I find myself getting reactive, ooh, take 3 deep breaths. Then I say, can the opposite of what I'm telling myself, the very opposite, be just as true or even truer than my automatic thought?
Interesting.
And
Okay.
guess what? Curiosity is had because I just asked that one question. When I start to do the, wonder, could the opposite be true? You've already stepped into curiosity and learning.
So I'm just curious, a lot of what you're saying is coming from a book I read. That's how I picked up on this, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, I don't know it.
Very good book. It's a more scientific approach of what you're doing. That's where the breathing came in. I literally just listened to the chapter. And that's where he said, if you're emotional, if you're emotional, it overrides logic, but logic can't override emotions. But he said, but there's a caveat. If you breathe, and while you're breathing, you ask yourself, is this, well, he says in his scientific terms, is this system 1 or emotions, or is this system 2? Or like you're saying, will this happen or this happen? If you say it's number 1, he's like, immediately readjust and figure out how to get back to logical as you're breathing. And it was just one of those, I sat there and I started talking to people. I'm like, it's so simple. It doesn't matter how many ways you explain it. You'll never fully be able to teach everyone that.
No, exactly. I love that because these are the tools we weren't given in school. Right?
No.
You would think that we'd be equipped to how do we take care of ourselves? How do we become responsive versus reactive people? Those very important tools, breathing, how to get out of our defense. Those things aren't taught to us. But the cool thing is we're getting bombarded now with ways that we can change ourselves.
Right.
And the other thing is, so we have 3 parts to our learning. Science has shown: IQ, EQ, BQ, body intelligence, emotional intelligence, and IQ. Most of us have only operated from here. So if we don't want to repeat the patterns that keep us stuck, we must learn how to feel, not only breathe, but how to feel our feelings all the way through. So emotional intelligence, studies have shown our feelings that come up that we have: anger, sadness, frustration, fear, joy, creative energy. Mm-hmm. They only last in our body at most, science says, 90 seconds.
Right.
But you and me have been taught, don't feel your feelings. Excuse me 1 second. Getting a scratch. We have been taught emotions are bad. Emotions don't belong here at school. Emotions don't belong at work. But we're missing our wisdom when we don't feel our feelings and we don't allow them to come through our body.
Right.
And so if we allow them to come and they show up in certain parts of our body, our emotions are connected to our thinking. The thinking triggers our emotions, and then the emotions show up in our body. Allowing it to pass through us as an energy then allows us to think clearly. But when we store the emotion in our body, which most of us do, we call it cognitive looping. We recycle the same pattern over and over because we can't think clearly because the emotion is still stuck in us. So we keep repeating the pattern over and over and over. So the answer is, can I build a little more capacity to feel maybe the sadness I feel, even though it's terrifying for most of us to feel our feelings, we want to push it away like, once we start to become comfortable with, they're just emotions, they're just energy, they're going to pass right through us. If I just welcome it and let it pass through me, then I can think clearly. So that's another tool that I teach people, is how to feel and allow the feelings to come, but let them pass through us.
That's so interesting. So the one thing, I don't know if it was just intentional or just I picked up on it, but when I was doing martial arts at a younger age, my instructor, being the way he was just yelling, like, punch your feelings out of your body. And it was just one of those, oh my God, like, kind of thing. And as I've gotten through the ranks and I realized, oh no, he literally was meaning like punch your anger out of your body. Oh, well, don't literally hit yourself. That's just stupid, but hit the bag as if it was someone else. And that's where I just sat there and I'm like, wow, there was old reserves of rage I didn't even know I had back there. And now it's gone. But it was just one of those, my instructor told me, he's like, you were an excellent fighter, this and that, you kept a level head, but if someone just clipped you the wrong way, man, we really were questioning if we had to get a paramedic because your rage was so bad.
Yeah, beautiful, because you did store it in your adrenals. So when we don't feel our feelings, it gets locked in as cortisol. Mm-hmm. And the cortisol then gets stuck in our adrenals. And that hormone, science believes, is what creates a lot of high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, migraines, heart attacks, because we weren't meant to store it, but we haven't learned a way out. So it's beautiful. And body intelligence, like what your instructor was saying, body intelligence is allow it to come out. So feel and express and let it come through you and sense what's going on for your body. So there is truth to that. So using all three. So I know we're almost at time.
I was how long do you have another one after this?
Hold on, let me look really quick. Checking, hold please. I have one in 15 minutes. So I want to take a break because I have to use the restroom before I get on the call.
I would say, then let's finish that up. And then we definitely need to book one in the future.
Yes. Yeah. So tell me, like, this is so exciting. I'm so appreciating you for having such wisdom at such a young age, have these conversations, because, you're incredible. And I really appreciate you having these deep discussions. And I applaud you, because I'm just going to make up a story. My want and desire is that people my age and older would be willing to sit with these kinds of conversations that are transformational.
Right.
So just really appreciating you. Yeah.
Thank you. I've always been a bit of an old steward at a young age. I've always been taught, think, use your mind, wisdom, and all that. That's where I joke now with my instructor. He's like that all in one. He tries to get you a girlfriend while selling you some insurance kind of thing. Classic Middle Easterner. And essentially, he told me, he's like, why can't you get a girl? I'm like, dude, I'm like the wisdom of a 45-year-old, 50-year-old, but I'm 28 and no one that age wants to date me because of bad experience. And no one my age wants to date me because I'm too mentally old. So I'm like, I might just be, I'll have pets like fish and I'll be good. I'll be happy.
I hear you. I hear you. Like us souls that are like unique. It's like, we don't quite fit in, but we're here for a purpose. So
right.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Okay. So where are you releasing this and when are you releasing this? How can I support you?
Well, congratulations. You made it to the end. You're an awesome person. Not many make it here. So being the awesome person that you are, can you do me one more awesome favor? Can you rate and review this on whatever podcast services you're using? If you do it on Apple, and you leave an actual written review, I have a thing on my website. I will take your written review and post it for all to see. Congratulations, you're permanently sealed on my site. Otherwise, I am trying to do YouTube more and live streaming. I will try to put as many of the YouTube links in the description of the show as I can. So give your boy some extra help over on YouTube. Watch my videos. I just mute it and change the channel, change the window or something. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for being awesome, and see you next time.